A very good afternoon to distinguished panelists, our most valued, enthusiastic students, and my worthy colleagues. It gives me immense joy to welcome you all to the webinar on subject orientation for overview of optional subjects for LLB third term. The seminar aims to examine, evaluate, and address the contemporary relevance of the subjects offered at Law Center 1 so as to enable students to take a reasoned, rational decision. I extend a warm welcome to all of you and may we all leave more enriched and enlightened. I now request Dr. Anju Sinha to please deliver the welcome address. Over to you, ma'am.
A very good afternoon to all of you. I hope you all are safe in your homes. It's my pleasure to welcome you all in this webinar for subject orientation, where the overview of subject will be given by the subject experts. As you all know that in third term, there are 4 compulsory subjects and 1 optional subject is to be opted by the student from the options given in the option form. So many times the student find it difficult to choose an optional subject because they have no clue about the syllabus. They have no idea that what is the scope and practical use of the subject. So for the purpose of facilitating the students, Law Center 1 under the guidance of Professor in charge, Professor Dr. Sarabjit Kaur is organizing this webinar where the subject experts will tell you about the importance and scope of the subject. The resource person for the purpose of explaining the importance of the subject today are Dr. Alok Sharma, Dr. Gurpreet Singh and Dr. Amit Sinha. Dr. Alok Sharma will speak on crime 3, that is white collar crime. Dr. Gurpreet Singh will speak on private international law and Dr. Amit Sinha will speak on media and law. So I'll not take much of your time, but before handing over the mic to the resource person or before calling the resource persons, let me tell you few points, like few things I would like to bring into your notice. Number 1, that filling of option form is mandatory for you. And option, the subject will be allotted strictly on the basis of what you have filled in your option form. So please, you must fill this option form, number 1. Number 2, the option form will be available on the website of Law Center 1 today itself after the orientation program. And the last date for submission of option form is 27th of June. So just make sure that you have filled the form before that deadline, because as we all know that the session will start in August, and before that the timetable is to be prepared, and for that we need the options given by you. So just make sure that you are submitting your form before the deadline. Now, third point which I would like to mention here is that if even after this webinar you are having any doubt or any confusions in your mind regarding option of subject, then you can contact the resource person or you can contact the faculty members who are teaching the subjects. And in addition to that, you can also go to the official website of Law Center 1 where the case material of all the cases is being given. So you can just go through the syllabus of each and every subject, and even after that if you are having any doubt, you can contact to either to the resource person or to any of the faculty member who is teaching the subject. And I'll not take much of your time. But before concluding, one more point I would like to mention here, and that is for those of you who are not, who could not attend this program, this webinar today, we are uploading this webinar to the official website of Law Center 1. So I'm sure that you are going to be benefited by this presentation made by the subject experts. So over to Dr. Alok Sharma. Thank you.
Thank you. Namaskar to all, dear directors and coordinators of this webinar and my dearest students of third semester. First of all, I would like to thank our professor in charge, Professor Sarabjit Kaur, to get this webinar organized and giving me the opportunity to introduce a very important and interesting course. I also thank director and coordinators of this webinar for their efforts. I also thank the student of Law Center 1 to participate in large numbers as the course is exclusively for them. I have assigned the job to introduce Law of Crimes 3. Now, Law of Crimes 3, which we call as the white collar crimes. Now, as the name itself shows that it is about different kind of crimes. Now, if in your first year, you have studied the substantive criminal law as well as the procedural law. That substantive law was a traditional law, general law. And in that, you have discussed the IPC as substantive law and CRPC as procedural law. Now, here in Law of Crimes 3, you shall study the special crimes in different way. Now, this course talks about variety of special criminal laws. Now, when we talk about the IPC and CRPC, we talk it as the traditional criminality. And when we talk about the Law of Crimes 3, that is the special kind of criminality. Generally, we use it as the new criminality. So that is different thing. Now, before I introduce the subject, I want to thank the Faculty of Law that they have given me the opportunity in 2015 to conceive this course and develop this course, which I have done with the help of various teachers who assisted me from all the 3 centers. Now, initially, when I coined this course was emphasizing on the socio-economic criminality. So at that time, we had different acts like Domestic Violence Act, SC/ST, Atrocities Prevention Act, and other laws. But gradually, the emphasis was shift on the white collar crimes. So I have changed the course accordingly, and we focus here in this law on the white collar crimes, the crimes which basically affect not only the society but also the economy. So socio-economic offenses we used to define as the offenses which affect the society as well as economy of the country. Now in white collar crimes, of course, the impact is large on society, but immediate concern is the economy of the country. So in the Law of Crimes 3, we will have this kind of a special new criminality which is very much different from the traditional criminality in the form of IPC. Now in this course, we have many statutes. So this course is not about one law, it is about various statutes. And in all, we have 5 statutes in this course. Now, all the sections of those statutes have not been incorporated in your syllabus, and we have incorporated only those sections which are relevant for your purpose. Our concern is to introduce that new kind of criminality to you and introduce the procedure to you, what is required for implementation of this new criminality. So as the name itself shows that crimes, so those students who have in their first year developed a kind of liking towards the criminal law, or those who wants to practice the criminal law in after getting their degree, or those who want to choose any kind of profession which is related to criminal law, I suggest and advise you to opt this paper. This paper will help you in your practice in criminal law and related fields. Now, the Law of Crimes has 6 units in all, and the unit 1 is about the theoretical aspect of the socio-economic offenses and white collar crimes. Now here they talk about what is the nature of this, what is the requirement of this criminality, what is the need for this, how it is different from the traditional kind of criminality, what are the theories behind this new criminality, and how the concept of white collar crimes is applicable and how it developed in our country. So basically topic 1 is about the theoretical aspect of socio-economic offenses and white collar crimes. Unit 2 is about the act, which is the Prevention of Immoral Trafficking Act. So this act is here, and few provisions have been mentioned of this act to make you understand that what is the provisions in this law and how it is to be implemented. Another unit is the Food Safety and Standards Act. which talks about food issues and the standard which the people have to maintain, and it is a very comprehensive law in this area. Another area is the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substance Act. And I feel that presently we have a kind of lucrative career in this the law. So if you are interested in this law and after getting some kind of insight into this act, you shall be able to choose this area as your practice area. Another area is of Prevention of Corruption Act, which you all know that many cases have arisen in this area, and it is again a very good area of practice. And the last statute is Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So basically we have the 5 laws, and you see that all the 5 laws are very relevant and pertinent to the present scenario. Many of the cases you see day and night, we see in the television news channels that the so and so case has been booked under the Money Laundering Act, so and so person is booked under the Prevention of Corruption Act. So by giving you the overview of these 5 different acts, you can choose your career after studying these laws. And interesting thing in these acts is that they talk about the substantive provisions of these laws as well as the procedural aspect of this law. As you all know that when there is a special law, a special procedure has to be coined for implementation of these laws. Now in this, all the 5 acts, there are special procedures for investigation of these offenses, trial of these offenses, and even the sentencing policies are different for these laws. So my suggestion to you that if you have interest in criminal law and if you want to do practice in this law, I suggest that kindly opt for this paper as the option in your 3rd term. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your thoughts with us. It is always a pleasure to hear from you. Now, I request Dr. Gurpreet Singh to present his views on private international law. Sir, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Shavika.
Welcome, sir.
Just a minute, let me share my slides first.
Indeed, sir.
Is it visible now?
Yes, sir, they are visible.
Okay. Okay, myself is Dr. Gurpreet Singh. I'm going to introduce to private international law. That is an optional subject in LLB semester 3rd. What is private international law? Dear friends, the private international law is also known as a conflict of laws. It generally deals with the jurisdictions between the natural persons, companies, corporations, other legal entities, their legal obligations, and appropriate forum and procedure for solving disputes between them. You can understand better if you will go by an example. Here, there is example of a matrimonial case. If a person X, who is a citizen of Canada, married a girl who is citizen of India, and their marriage took place in India, and after marriage both shifted to Canada. Later on, some matrimonial dispute arose between both parties. Now, in such scenario, of which country law would be applicable? It is the question of private international law, which will tell you about which court has the jurisdictions and the law of which country would be applicable. You can take one more example, and that is example of commercial transactions. For example, if A is a seller in India, B is a buyer in England, B wanted to buy some goods from India and made a contract with A. A made a promise to send certain goods to the B through sea route. For this purpose, A engaged a ship, and ship is registered in France. Goods are sent to that ship, through that ship which is registered in France, and due to the rough weather, ship sank in the midway in the high sea. Now A says since he has already sent the goods, he should be paid. But B says no, since he did not receive the goods, therefore he is not bound to pay. On the other hand, the ship is registered in the France. They also claim that there must be reimbursement for the ship which sank during the carrying those goods from India to England. Now there is conflict of laws. Whose law would be applicable here? Whether law of India, whether the law of England, or whether the law of France. So this kind of situation where there are three possibilities, where there are three different claims. Therefore, this title conflict of law also indicate that there are more than two laws which are supposed to be applicable in a given situation. That's why the term is conflict of laws. And private international law is trying to resolve that conflict. It will tell you which law would be applicable, which court has the jurisdictions. Therefore, it is known as a conflict of laws. Why the term is private international law? Again, the private international law is simply means because these law predominantly deals in the civil matters between the citizens of different countries or two or more countries. It is civil in nature. So, in contrast to the public international law, where the states are the predominant actors, in private international law, these are the citizens or nationals of different countries or companies or corporations of different countries. They are subject matter of the private international law. Now, what is the nature of the private international law? Private international law is just like a middle territory between the domestic law and the international law. Private international law is a branch of the municipal law. Why it is branch of the municipal law? Because ultimately, when the forum is going to apply the law, they will apply the law of their own country. Or it may be the law which is prevalent in another municipal limit in another country. So there is no any third law, but the function of the private law is that is to tell of which country law would be applicable. So you can also compare it with the railway inquiry counter, where the person will go and inquiry that where the train will go, when the train will go. So private international law is just like that, where you will inquiry that which law would be applicable, which court has the jurisdictions, where the cause of actions lies. So private international law is going to tell you this. So it does not solve the dispute, but it will give you a way where the dispute could be solved. Another important aspect of the private international law is there must be involvement of some foreign element. So foreign element can be in the sense that it may be in the sense of the if a person is of foreign nationals, if if a land is bought in some foreign countries where the dispute has arisen, or if some kind of contract has been made between the different nationals of the different countries, so some kind of foreign element must be involved in order to invoke the private international law. So where private international law could be invoked, there are 3, 4, 5 examples which I have given there. In matrimonial disputes, I have already told you. Contracts, I have already discussed about this through an example. Then law of torts, if the torts is committed against a foreign nationals in India. Property, when some Indian citizens bought property in foreign countries and later on the dispute arose on that property. Then and last, commercial transactions. In all those scenarios, private international law could be invoked. Now, as I have already told you, what is the function of the private international law? There are 3 major functions of private international law. Private international law determines the applicability of law. It will tell you which law would be applicable. For example, in matrimonial dispute, it will tell you whether the law of Canada would be applicable or law of India would be applicable where the marriage took place. So that's why it is also known as a choice of law, that which law the forum is going to choose while deciding a case. So there are certain principles which have been propounded with the passage of time, which will tell about the choice of law and which will help to the court while determining the choice of law. So another important aspect is determination of the jurisdictions. In case of that goods which is supposed to be supplied from India to England and which perished during the ways because of the rough weathers, then which court would have the jurisdictions? Whether court of England or court of India or court of France. So private international law is going to tell you about the jurisdictional issue. Once the forum has appropriate jurisdictions in a case, it is going to decide the matter. And another important aspect of private international law is enforcement of foreign judgment or decree. If a judgment is given by the by court in England, then how that judgment can be enforced in India, how the decree can be enforced in India. So when these judgments or decree can be enforced in India, what would be a principles or what would be the parameters for enforcement of these judgments and decrees? So private international law is going to deal with that. Now, as I have already told you that private international law uh, talks about the choice of law, that which law would be applicable. So there are a number of factors which will help to the court to decide that decide a choice of law. Among them, there may be law of forum, law of nationality, domiciles, or sometimes it may be the cause of action where the cause of action has arisen or where the property is situated. So on number of the factors, the court will decide which law would be applicable. But it must be remembered when the court is going to make the choice of law, it is not bound to apply the foreign laws as such because of they are bound. In order to apply the foreign laws, that must be in consonance with the Indian constitutions or the constitution of that particular country. It must not violate the provisions of that. Uh, in general, in procedural matter, the courts apply the law of forum, their own laws. In substantial matters, sometimes the foreign law could be invoked, and sometimes it can be invoked in the sense of the evidence and nothing more than that for the court. So while applying the foreign laws, court will look into the different factors. Another important objectives and aims of this private international law. What are the objectives and aims of teaching of private international law? In nutshell, we can say private international law is mainly national law dealing with the civil cases involving the foreign elements. It is termed as a PIL. PIL doesn't mean here the public international law. Here it is private international law. It talks about the theories and rules of PIL that will be taught in this course. All the legal sources of PIL was mostly be found in the domestic legislation. This course helps students develop an international and comparative perspective, and it is to sure to benefit their future legal practice and further pursuit of legal studies. So these are the following objectives of teaching this subject. First is to be familiar with the legal terms, significant theories and basic legal rules and principles of PIL. And number two, to develop an understanding of methodology of subject. Number three, grasping the way of dealing with the PIL disputes. And number four, knowing about the PIL of some major countries because your syllabus contains reference to the laws which are prevalent in England as well as in America. And last, to continue to develop students' analytical and critical capacities. So private international law is going to be a very, very interesting law for the students who are going to opt or who want to do the practice in that area, particularly when the there is the conflict of laws, or when they wanted to go into the deep study of conflicts of the law for different nations and how they are going to solve that conflict. So therefore, that is going to be interesting for them when they are going to read all those principles, all those the judgments which lay those certain kind of parameters while deciding the conflict of the laws of different countries. So certainly they are going to get the benefit when they are going to opt this subject, that is private international law. Thank you very much. Wishing for the best of luck to all the students. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your experiences with us. I'm certain it will really benefit the students. I would now call upon Mr. Amit Sinha to discuss the subject of media and law.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here. I thank all my colleagues from Faculty of Law and the directors and coordinators of this webinar series. I'm here to deal with the course on media law and censorship. Uh, it is, I don't have to tell you that the subject is very important, and particularly in contemporary society, it has gained so much of importance. There's a huge debate going on. There's a regarding the credibility of media with respect to the paid news, with respect to fake news, with respect to the debate between Godi media and left media or press issues, etc., etc. So this course will enable you to appreciate uh, the different nuances of laws which are there in place and how those laws operate in our society. So there is not one law which deals with media. There are various laws to deal and regulate media of different kinds. Uh, and this course, again, is very comprehensive one. It allows you to appreciate different conflicting interests in the society. For example, someone's right to access information gets in conflict with someone's right to privacy. So, keeping that in context, this course will enable you to appreciate this kind of conflicting interests. So, basically, this course is divided into 8 parts. First part deals with what was the status of media in colonial times, how with the development, how with the gradual development of media and press in the society, the media fought for its freedom from colonial rulers, and how with gradually approaching independence, we were able to secure more and more freedom from media. Similarly, second module deals with constitutional provisions and some of the conflicting interests. So here we will study some of the constitutional provisions which provide right of media or freedom of media. We shall also compare it with the US Constitution. What are the rights and regulations that are there in US Constitution with respect to rights of media? We will study some of the conflicting interests like right to privacy, right against defamation, and sting operations. So how media played its role in this type of scenario, and how courts will reconcile a right to privacy with right of media, etc. There are other very important subjects in module 2 like right to information and trial by media, which is definitely not understood to be a very good aspect of media. So we shall study how courts have dealt with those matters. Third module is relating to right to contempt of court. Sometimes media scandalizes court, vilifies court. In that situation, what approach has been taken by courts? To my understanding, courts have always been very lenient towards media. An apology by editor or the media houses are usually enough. The court forgive them even if there's no truth in the news spread by media. Fourth module, again very important module, deals with the regulation of media. As you are aware, we have three kinds of media, main three kinds of media branches. Print media, which is newspapers you get at your home every day. Broadcasting media, news channels like Aaj Tak, GTV, ABP, NDTV, etc. and social media platforms. There can be various social media platforms. So fourth module tells you how the government has tried to regulate these media, how these media branches. So we have Prasar Bharati India Act to regulate print media. We have a Broadcasting Act for regulation of broadcasting media. We have some of the sections in IT Act, Information Technology Act, to regulate social media problems. So in those situations, we shall be not only studying these aspects, we shall also be appreciating or be able to appreciate different kinds of regulations which are in place. Fifth module relating to the commercial advertisements and right of the government to advertise its policies, its achievements. So can it be done or not, or whether commercial advertisements are fundamental rights or not. So these are the aspects we shall be studying in this particular module. Module 6 deals with gag order censorship. So what happens sometimes, government puts curb on the right of, on the freedom of media through censorship or through gag orders. The courts simply say that you cannot publish this particular piece of information. So those are usually considered like gag orders. So what are the laws are there? What are the case laws are there? We shall definitely be studying in this particular module. Module 7 deals with the publication of legislative reportings. So whatever is happening in parliament or legislative houses, can media publish those information? Can media publish the incidences happening in this in those branches? So these are the areas we shall be studying in this case, in this particular module. The last module, which is 8th module, is basically relating to contemporary areas. For example, the menace of paid news, how courts have dealt with paid news issues, or the government is dealing with paid news issues, and the poll surveys. That poll surveys are basically, pre-poll surveys have been banned in India, as you must be aware. The courts have actually banned in pre-poll surveys. We can only do post-poll surveys. So what are the laws, regulation, case laws on those issues? So what about the cross ownership? Someone who is the owner of media is also is a representative in government. So what are the conflicting interests in those cases? So basically this particular course is very comprehensive one. It's very interesting. I mean, again, the case laws are very interesting case laws. You will enjoy reading each and every case laws which we have in the course. So therefore, I would request you to opt for this subject, because it's not very technical subject, though it requires some hard work with respect to studying various statute regulations, case law. But it happens in every other subject. Plus, it's very interesting. You can relate it to the present time and contemporary time to understand what is going on in contemporary world. So I leave it up to you, to your discretion. But this subject will definitely enable you to understand different nuances of media. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your Now, I take this opportunity to thank our professor in charge, Professor Dr. Sarabjit Kaur, for being a constant support and guidance. Whenever there was a need, she was always there to help us, to guide us. I also thank to the resource persons for taking out time from their schedule and coming here and sharing the valuable information with the students. And I also thank the entire team of Timetable Committee. And last but not the least, I'll be failing in my duty if I do not thank to Ms. Shivika Chaudhary, because she was working day and night, and it's her hard work that this program is a success. So thank you so much, Shivika. And before concluding, I would like to just remind you again that the option form will be uploaded today evening. You will find it on the website of Law Center 1. 27th is the last date for submission of the form. Please do submit the form before that deadline, because the session will start in August, and before that the timetable is to be prepared, and the timetable will be prepared on the basis of options which are being given by you. So please, before 27th, you submit the option form, And those of you who have missed this program, it will be uploaded to the official website of Law Center 1. Thank you so much.
Thank you.